since 2005, previously a minister in the Ministry of Defence, but now in the Department of Health. Philip, we're delighted to have you with us, and I would ask you now to address the gathering.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Geoffrey, and I'm really delighted that you're here hosting this, given that, as you rightly say, you have no direct involvement in health in England, but the NHS in Northern Ireland learns much of its innovation from what happens across the NHS generally. I am here really by default. The Secretary of State, I think, was meant to be your top billing guest this evening, not least because his constituency is within the STP area, and Sir Andrew has a very good arm lock on him to turn up to things. Unfortunately, it wasn't strong enough this evening, so you've got his number two. My job in the Ministry of Defence has been going for, Ministry of Health, 6 months and 6 days, and I'm obviously not counting. But as Geoffrey says, I've come from Defence, and I'm therefore particularly pleased that part of my role is to support the Secretary of State on workforce issues, and that runs the whole gamut. There are 1.4 million people working, a lot of them part-time, but over 1 million full-time equivalents working in our NHS. And how you organise an organisation as big as that is obviously down to the leadership that pulls it all together. And it's been very evident to me for the relatively short time that I've been taking an interest in this, that we've created this sort of perverse, not so much structure, but culture within the NHS, that doctors are good and managers are evil. And we have to absolutely change the rhetoric and make it very clear that doctors and managers are as valuable as each other, and we don't seek to set them against each other, which I think has been a problem in the past. And we need to see more transition between the two branches of activity, which are together delivering the best patient outcomes that we possibly can. So I want to see, the only way we can do that, of course, is to provide leadership, political leadership at the top. We need to persuade our senior political colleagues not to be talking down leadership structures within the NHS. And right within the NHS, we need to have structures in place to help find the leaders of today and tomorrow and nurture them to become the leaders of the future. And I don't think this starts at the board level. I think this starts on the ward. It starts in the bays around the bed. We need to be encouraging people at the very most simplest leadership roles, whereby one individual is giving instructions to another individual, and from that point forward we try to instill the sense that you're not going to progress in the NHS unless you can demonstrate skills of leadership to those for whom you are responsible. And I think that goes right the way through. So this course is a great example of how you're trying to put together within an STP area a greater sense of cohesion and leadership, and look for the leaders for tomorrow. And that's why I'm so pleased that I was invited to come to you, to join you this evening briefly, to understand a little bit about what you're doing. I see this as a trailblazer. We've got, as I've already mentioned, the surgeon captain here from the south, and it's really good to see Defence. I think I can manage, Patrick. Playing a role in trying to help you with this. And Steve Hart is here, who's taken over the Leadership Academy, having come from Shrivenham, another core element of defence leadership. And he and I are working closely together to try to put together a coherent structure for how we develop leadership talent right across the NHS. So I think this is absolutely fundamental to what we need to do as a generation of people trying to help run the NHS. But for the future, we leave it in better shape than we found it, and we leave it with better leaders from the ground up who will be able to take it forward for generations to come. So Peter, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for securing the support for this programme from the STP leadership with Sir Andrew and the other chief execs who are, and chairman who are in the room. I think you're showing the way to the rest of the NHS about how important leadership is, and for your first 27 cohort, I do hope you find the experience today and tomorrow interesting. I was intrigued to see from your program that you're starting with 40 minutes of yoga, which will give you time to reflect on what you've discussed this evening for dinner. I think much of what we learn from these kinds of things is how other people in not necessarily the same situation as you are, but other parts of the NHS, other parts of the public sector, other parts of the private sector, as Peter was saying, approach similar problems and often in rather different ways. And that sort of mentoring and coaching and, frankly, knowing who to call in a different part of the STP is all part of what it takes to become a good leader. You tend to learn from others. And on that happy note, I'm going to leave you and go and join the Secretary of State for my dinner. Have a good dinner. I hope you enjoy the course. Thank you.